Hello, I'm Neil Hickson, and this is We All Need Nature, the podcast about green social prescribing. In this episode, I'm joined by Vicki Birch of the Canals and River Trust. She takes me into the world of blue social prescribing. That is, getting people into, onto or alongside water to improve their well-being. Vicki came to our project, Birch Community Farm, to volunteer for a day. Vicki works for the Canals and River Trust, and the Trust give her 2 days every year that she can use to volunteer with other organisations. I'd met Vicki at a recent Natural England event where she'd told me about her very interesting job.
I work for Canal and River Trust as the Participation, Health and Wellbeing Project Manager. I support our project coordinators to deliver participatory campaigns. It could be planting, it could be yoga, it could be knitting.
We'll come back to the knitting later. Vicki also tells me her story of how wanting to find her own thing in life opened up huge changes to her family and eventually her career.
Saw a sign for a canoe club. I was terrified. I had never done anything like that before.
Our farm is sandwiched between two strips of water. On one side is a small river called the Ellerbrook. It sometimes swells to scurry levels 3 metres above the field. And on the other side is the Rufford branch of the Leeds to Liverpool Canal. Over the years, both of them have made successful attempts at getting into the farm and putting us underwater. The threat of flooding often makes me feel our neighbouring canal is a malevolent beast and we need to be wary of it. The canal's surface is 4 or 5 feet above the level of the field, and it's weird to see barges sail by at head height. But Vicki gave me a new perspective on the canal and how we could make use of our watery neighbour to extend what the farm can offer people. At the end of the volunteer day, Vicki agreed to sit down with me and have a chat for the podcast.
I cover the whole of the Northwest and I support our project coordinators to deliver participatory campaigns. So we call it Let's walk, let's paddle, let's cycle. It could be planting, it could be yoga, it could be knitting. It's anything that gets people active, socialising and then connecting with their waterways.
I never connected knitting with waterways. How does that work?
So knitting is generally for older residents and the local community, and they will come together to socialise and they will do arts and crafts generally to feed into our events. So they made big paper mache hats, so it's not always knitting, it's a bit of craft. They've made mosaics. They are currently covering one of our old logo gazebos with lovely patterns because gazebos cost an absolute fortune, and yeah, they're covering it up and making it usable for many more days.
So you're really being sort of creative there, finding new ways that people can link to the canal system, which, you know, that's a kind of industrial transport system from just 200 years ago, and there's like a relevance to it now.
Yeah, definitely. My role is very much about connecting people to heritage, ecology, and then people. So how do people use space and how can that, so the canals, as you say, are 200 years old, how do they have meaning for people today? So it's very important that we talk about the heritage and why and how the canals were built and why they're here, but how they're used today as well, and it's very different from their original use.
Yeah, massive network, isn't there, over the whole country.
It was about 10 years ago. We were going through a diagnosis for my son for autism, and at the time he was presenting with very challenging behaviour, and you very quickly become quite isolated. So I knew I needed to get out and do something. Saw a sign for a canoe club. I was terrified. I had never done anything like that before. I was working in schools at the time and went down, really loved it. And over the space of a year, the instructors supported me and I became an instructor. And because I was working in a school, I started to take other young people out because I'd seen my son flourish on the water, because the family joined me. They heard about how much fun I was having. They came along, loved it. So I thought, right, there's a lot of children in school who, really struggling academically, maybe getting themselves in trouble. Let's get them out on the water, just see. And they loved it and they thrived. And the ones who were probably getting in trouble at school were the ones who were the leaders on the water, and they just found their place and they loved it. So I saw a job at Canal and River Trust for the Desmond Family Canoe Trail. So it was a project working with 16 to 24-year-olds, getting young people out doing social action, vegetation management, litter picks, art projects. I just thought this job's written for me. So with a lot of encouragement from my mum, I applied for the job, and I've now been at the Trust for 6 years. And I've worked my way up to the role I'm in now, where I support our project coordinators to help shape their offer.
So that really was a transformation story for your family as well as your son.
Yeah, definitely. So struggling academically, he was just constantly in trouble all the time and getting phone calls home. And then we got into the paddling, and I was telling everybody how much fun I was having. And then the kids came along, and he just thrived. He found this environment where he could paddle as hard as he wanted, and he could jump in the water and really just be him. So he flourished. Then we met a lot of people with similar interests. And you go away camping at the weekend, and then you travel in to the French Alps, and it transformed our lives. So that just shows, just trying something new, never know where that might take you.
Yeah, so it's taken you, not only helped you and helped your family, helped your son there, it's actually turned into a career, really, linking you to water.
Yeah. So through my son, I ended up going on a journey of, I need to know, give me the information. So I started studying social psychology, and then I finished that. So then I decided, right, what do I do now? So then I decided to try health psychology. So I did a master's in health psychology, and just really now figuring out what that bridge is between the clinical model and what it is that we do with the green and blue, getting people out and active, and how we can all learn to speak the same language. And we know that there are certain audiences that might not go for support in a clinical setting, but they might come along with us and have a walk, and on that walk they might meet somebody and socialise and really begin to open up. And it's a bit like going on a journey. So throughout that walk along the canal, we'll only have been there an hour, but by the end of it, people have formed new friendships and those social opportunities, and really taking the time just to connect with nature. And we might stop along the way and talk a little bit about the heritage or the wildlife that changes on every corner that you turn on. So yeah, there's definitely something very therapeutic about being on the waterways.
People love water, don't they? They're drawn to it. I don't know, it's a natural instinct from our ancestors where we obviously need water to drink, but also water is a place where animals go to feed. You go down to the beach, the seaside, and there's food lying around, literally, isn't there? So I think there's this draw towards water. Something you mentioned there, I was quite interested in, what's the journey for people getting into what you provide? How do you recruit people? How do they get involved?
So it's very much place-based, and it depends on what the project is. People can be socially prescribed onto our offer. They can also come through another community partner, so like yourselves, we might connect with you and you offer an amazing space and growing and nature, and then you might decide to join with us to go on a walk or get people in a boat for a change, and we offer something that adds to your offer. And through that way, you are the gatekeeper, so that community gets to know us, they learn a little bit more about the waterways. Also, people use the towpaths for walking to work, cycling to work, taking the grandchildren out to feed the ducks. We've all been there. It's part of growing up, isn't it? And just connecting with that water space. So the more that we talk to people and just raise awareness of what it is that we offer and how they can get involved, and making sure that if there isn't an offer there for somebody that they're interested in, then that's where we look to shape it with those people.
Quite a unique job then, isn't it? And presumably this works to the canal's advantage in that you're seeing your asset, the canal and the rivers, being used more creatively.
Yeah, definitely. So our vision is about transforming places and enriching lives, and the canals run through very diverse communities, and each community might use it differently. So it's very important that we understand and get to know that community and then empower them through training, through access to resources, through connecting. So we might meet yourself, who is a fantastic project, and we know that there are other projects out there that may benefit from you, or even just come in having a talk to you. We make those connections as well. So it's about, if we stepped away, is that community stronger from the work that we've done? That's the shift that we're working towards now.
How would an organisation, a project like ours, get to work with you? What's that process?
So for yourself, you're in a prime location, you're right next to the canal. It's really about embracing the waterways and bringing that into your community offers. We talked about gatekeepers before. You are a gatekeeper for this community, you are a trusted partner. So people might walk down the canal to arrive at your space. So it's just taking a moment to reflect about that journey and capturing it as well, because the more we recognise and understand people are using the waterways, then towpaths will be repaired, investment is brought into the area, but it's about listening to the local people as well and what is it that they want and need. So it's about being open and being approachable. So and making sure our offer is advertised on our website. And every October we have a Let's Collaborate community forum. That's when we do our business planning. So it's where we're thinking about, right, okay, how are we going to work in our community engagement for the year ahead? And then we put an open call out to anybody in the Northwest. Come and have a chat with us, tell us about your projects. How can we work together collaboratively? Can we apply for joint funding together? What does that look like in the bigger picture, in the bigger context for Lancashire or Merseyside? How can we make all of that connect together?
It's a dimension to what the canals do that I didn't appreciate or know about, and it sounds like something that we could maybe explore further. Other projects like ours that you can give me an example of that has worked with you?
Yeah, so we have a project called Northern Lily in Oldham. Very much like yourself, they've adopted a parcel of land. I think it's from the local authority. They've grown it, it's amazing. They have a little bit of an orchard. They really well engaged with the community, and we had some funding from Sport England that we were distributing in response to the pandemic. Small grants, £5,000 to £10,000, and it was to engage communities in physical activity, working with the Sport England target audiences. So they contacted us, we came down, we had a chat with them, we gave them some introductory paddle sessions. They loved it, they're right on the canal, and they just really wanted to embrace the waterways. So through that funding they were able to buy some paddle sports equipment and go through training for their community leaders, for their project leaders, and they now go out and they do paddling and they do litter picks and they do vegetation management, and they're really connecting with that whole space around their project.
For us, thinking the canal is a separate thing from us. We're right next to it, it's there, but I don't think we've really engaged with it and seen it as an asset to part of our land. So what you're saying is what we could do is incorporate it into activities on the farm.
Yeah, definitely. So if you are looking to extend your reach, we talked before about social prescribers. So just examples, ideas that run around in my head. I call them fireworks. They go off.
Go for it. Set a few off for me. Go on.
So sometimes transport can be a barrier. So if you know you're trying to reach an audience and the canal is a route, then we could work together to create maybe maps that would signpost how to get to the farm down the map. From
so a bit like the brown sign thing that you see on the sides of the roads for places.
Yeah, but we could bring that to life. So in other areas, for example, we've had the community involved and we've written poems, and then throughout the canal we might have posts along the canal with sections of the poem on, so that will really bring to life that route and make it part of the journey. The other side of it then could be, because you're a growing project, it may be that you would have to communicate with our ecologists, but if you wanted to extend what you do out onto the canal network, and you could plant trees or berries or strawberries and things like that along the route as well, so it's kind of that journey to the farm along the canal. So yes, a project like that, you would have to make sure that you communicate with Canal and River Trust and get permission, but our ecologists are definitely open to that kind of collaborative working.
That's really interesting. There's quite a few things that we could perhaps see the canal not as just a body of water that's higher than our land, and sometimes we feel it even is a threat to us, but as something, as an asset that we can utilise, certainly for walks and for things like that. Now I'm finding it more and more that this idea of green social prescribing, the ability for it to transform people, is that your experience from what you've seen? Obviously you've experienced it yourself, but from seeing other people go through it?
Yeah, definitely. People, when they come to us to try volunteering, they might try one thing, but through speaking to other people, they'll weave their way through the trust. Many people then have gone on to work and employment. We have a walking project in Cheshire. It was targeting over 55s who were inactive, socially isolated, or maybe physically inactive, so not very active. And it was a 12-week programme. They came out, they might do just a 10-minute walk at the beginning on the first week, and then we work up to an hour at the end, at the 12 weeks. And they loved it. And the idea is after that, you've made some friends and maybe you'll feel a bit more confident and that you'll go off. But they loved it and they wanted to stay. So we've got 20 volunteers that lead on our walking programme in Cheshire. And I would say about 75% of them have actually been through the programme themselves. So they've loved it. They've really enjoyed and wanted to give back. So they've stayed with us. So
they become almost evangelists for...
Yeah, they're just inspiring the next group of participants that are coming through, and we've had to create a social walk. So there's now a 12-week programme and a social walk because people love it. The walks are never more than an hour. Leisurely walks, a lot of history, heritage, a lot of ecology, nature, and then there's always a brew at the end, and cake, hopefully.
Always cake. Must always be cake. So, one thing that we're thinking of introducing here at the farm is structured courses. Mm-hmm. And we're sort of free and open, and people can come and they can go whenever they want on volunteer days. But I'm wondering whether, if we offered them a course where we feel a little bit more compelled to come back and try it again and again, a few times. What's your experience of organising courses and things? So
there's a bit of a mixture. Feedback that we get is to sign up with mostly 12-week programmes. It's a bit intimidating if you've never been before to say, oh yeah, I'll commit to X amount of time. So we've talked about maybe having a one-off taster session and then sign up to the programme after. We've talked a lot to job centres, and they've talked about people that they're trying to encourage into work, but they know they're not ready. There's a lot more that they need to do, so it might just be building confidence, building motivation, just building that routine again of stepping back out, and to just jump back into employment is a big step. So having a structured course where they can come along and just really get back into that routine of being around people sometimes, and having to be out at a certain time, learning again. It's all part of getting back into work, so there's definitely a demand out there for it.
You mentioned there about having a taster day. What sort of onboarding process would you use to take people on and make sure they know what they're doing?
We've got a new volunteering structure. So historically, the Trust volunteer offer was very much gardening, laying towpaths, cutting back vegetation. Well, that might not be for everybody. We've got an events team, we've got a community engagement team, we've got an operations team, we've got engineering. So there's a whole diverse offer out there for them. So we'll have a taster day where they'll come and they'll just learn about the Trust, to maybe talk to some of the staff from the different teams, have a brew and biscuits, gotta have
and the cake.
It's on the cake. And just really get to know us, and through that time just understanding what people's interests are and then trying to map them into that offer. And I suppose that's very much like, you've got amazing space here and there's so many different activities for people to do, that just making sure that each activity is reflected. Oh, something else that we've done as well is day in the life of a lock keeper, a day in the life of an explorer, so that's the children and young people. So interviewing some of the volunteers and saying, what do you do on a daily basis, and really just helping people to imagine what it would be like to be in that role for the day.
And so what do you do with that then? Is that put in a video or content, or do they actually talk to the person direct?
Yeah, it should be advertised on our website. Under the volunteering section, there should be case study videos there that'll just give you an example. So on the Cheshire Walking programme, there are videos of our volunteers and the participants that are talking about their journey and how they were a bit worried before they started, but surprised that by week 12 they were able to walk confidently for that hour. So it's really just giving you that person's perspective of that volunteer or that participant of what their journey has been.
So that's something that perhaps we could do, maybe on a smaller scale, but and do you think the 12 weeks, is that like an optimal time?
So the 12 weeks for us is a key number for behaviour change. So like your gym will give you a 3-month membership. So a 12-week programme for us is, if you do something consistently for 12 weeks at the same time, on the same day, you're more likely to continue that long term. But some people might be put off by such a long time.
Sounds a long time, doesn't it?
It does.
So what would you recommend for us? We've got this length of canal running adjacent to our field. What kind of canoeing? You mentioned the stand-up paddleboarding, or I always thought something like Indian canoe, just sort of slowly going through and seeing the wildlife, etc. What would you recommend for us here on this site?
Yeah, so it depends what you want to do on the water, but I would always say speak to your participants, and like me, if they've never done it before, they might not know it's for them. So we could do some taster sessions for you, bring down a range of craft, but really understanding how it would enhance your offer. So if you wanted to just go for a paddle and do a water vole survey, for example, any craft, any. So the canoes are great. You can chuck your packed lunch in there, you can chuck your safety bag in and your picnic blanket. And
what type of canoe?
Canadian canoe. So about 16-foot canoe. You can go for a leisurely paddle on them, but I love the stand-up paddle boards. It's just the freedom. You can stand up, you can sit down, you do yoga on them.
Sounds a bit precarious, I've got to say.
No, a lot seated and lying down yoga, modified poses. No. Your downward dog is really, it doesn't matter how many times you do it, but when you go into downward dog and the sky's up and the water's down, something magical about that.
Sounds precarious, but anyway. A couple of Canadian type canoes which we could carry down from the barn here, take them to the water on a sunny afternoon, just gently paddle along, looking at the ducks and the coots and the moorhens and water voles maybe, I don't know. Yeah,
take a packed lunch with you. A lot of the time we raft the canoes. So all that means is we put 2 canoes together and we put a wooden beam in the middle.
That's more stable, I presume.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say in a single canoe you could probably get 2 adults and a child, but if you raft them together you could get 6 to 8 people in a raft, and then it's really stable. It doesn't matter how good you are at paddling, and you can just really enjoy being out on the water then.
That sounds ideal. This is another dimension, something else that we could add to our offer here at Birch Community Farm. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Are you a social prescriber? Or perhaps you've benefited from being socially prescribed something? Or maybe you just like to get outside and feel so much better because of that. If you've got a story you'd like to share with us, please get in touch. Contact me through our website, weallneednature.com. Thank you.